God is the love in which I forgive. God is the love in which I forgive. God is the strength in which I trust. God is the strength in which I trust. There is nothing, nothing to fear. There is nothing, nothing to fear. God's voice speaks to me all through the day. God's voice speaks to me all through the day. I am sustained by the love of God. I am sustained by the love of God. God is the love in which I forgive. God is the strength in which I trust. There is nothing, nothing to fear. There is nothing, nothing to fear. God's voice speaks to me all through the day. I am sustained by the love of God. Well, thank you so much for joining me today in studying A Course in Miracles, Workbook for Students, the last of our first review, Lesson 60, in A Course in Miracles published by Foundation for Inner Peace. I'm Miracle Willie, forgiveness teacher of the Ozarks. God is the love in which I forgive. God is the strength in which I trust. There is nothing to fear. God's voice speaks to me all through the day. I am sustained by the love of God. Okay, and we'll read the entirety of the lesson here in a little bit. Let's go look in our next text reading for today. And today is Thursday. Leap year day, February the 29th, 2024. So let's see. We're ready in chapter 7, the gifts of the kingdom. Next section is Roman numeral 10, the confusion of pain and joy. The kingdom is the result of premises, just as this world is. You may have carried the ego's reasoning to its logical conclusion, which is total confusion about everything. If you really saw this result, you could not want it. The only reason you could possibly want any part of it is because you do not see the whole of it. You are willing to look at the ego's premise. You are willing to look at the ego's premises, but not at their logical outcome. Is it not possible that you have done the same thing with the premises of God? Your creations are the logical outcome of His premises. His thinking has established them for you. They are exactly where they belong. They belong in your mind as part of your identification with His mind. Okay, let's read that again. They belong, so what belongs? His thinking has established them for you. Your creations are the logical outcome of God's premises. His thinking has established them for you. They are exactly where they belong. They belong in your mind as part of your identification with His. But your state of mind and your recognition of what is in it depends on what you believe about your mind. Whatever these beliefs may be, they are the premises that will determine what you accept into your mind. Wow, boy, what an amazing statement. The premises that we live by, if they're erroneous premises, we're going to accept illusions into our mind. If they're premises that are based on truth, then we'll be able to accept truth into our minds. A good example of that is if you come from the place that you're a miserable sinner and that you deserve separation from God, then that's the world you're going to see. If, on the other hand, you recognize that God doesn't create junk and that you're a holy creation of God, well, then that's the world you're going to learn to see. Paragraph 2. It is surely clear that you can both accept into your mind what is not there and deny what is. Yet the function God Himself gave your mind through His, you may deny, but you cannot prevent. It is the logical outcome of what you are. The ability to see a logical outcome depends on the willingness to see it, but its truth has nothing to do with your willingness. Truth is God's will. Share His will and you share what He knows. Deny His will as yours and you're denying His kingdom and yours. 3. The Holy Spirit will direct you only so as to avoid pain. Now that's nice to know, isn't it? The Holy Spirit will direct you. The Holy Spirit will direct you only so as to avoid pain. Surely no one would object to this goal if he recognized it. The problem is not whether what the Holy Spirit says is true, but whether you want to listen to what He says. You no more recognize what is painful than you know what is joyful, and are in fact very apt to confuse the two. The Holy Spirit's main function is to teach you to tell them apart, the difference between joy and pain. What is joyful to you is painful to the ego, and as long as you are in doubt about what you are, you will be confused about joy and pain. This confusion is the cause of the whole idea of sacrifice. Obey the Holy Spirit and you will be giving up the ego, but you will be sacrificing nothing. On the contrary, you will be gaining everything. When you let go of the ego, you'll be gaining everything. If you believed this, there would be no conflict. That is why you need to demonstrate the obvious to yourself. It is not obvious to you. You believe that doing the opposite of God's will can be better for you. You also believe that it is possible to do the opposite of God's will. Therefore, you believe that an impossible choice is open to you, and one which is both fearful and desirable. Yet God wills. He does not wish. Your will is as powerful as His, because it is His. The ego wishes do not mean anything, because the ego wishes for the impossible. You can wish for the impossible, but you can only will with God. This is the ego's weakness and your strength. 5. The Holy Spirit always sides with you and with your strength. As long as you avoid His guidance in any way, you want to be weak. Yet weakness is frightening. What else then can this decision mean except that you want to be fearful? The Holy Spirit never asks for sacrifice, but the ego always does. When you are confused about this distinction in motivation, it can only be due to projection. Projection is a confusion in motivation, and given this confusion, trust becomes impossible. No one gladly obeys a guide he does not trust, but this does not mean that the guide is untrustworthy. In this case, it always means that the follower is. However, this too is merely a matter of his own belief. Oh, the power of our belief, those premises. Believing that he can betray, he believes that everything can betray him. He had a false premise that he could betray. And therefore he believes that betrayal comes back towards him. Because what you send out, you're going to believe can come back. It's like that two-edged sword he talks about. Yet this is only because he has elected to follow false guidance. Unable to follow this guidance without fear, he associates fear with guidance and refuses to follow any guidance at all. If the result of this decision is confusion, this is hardly surprising. 6. The Holy Spirit is perfectly trustworthy as you are. God Himself trusts you, and therefore your trustworthiness is beyond question. It will always remain beyond question, however much you may question it. Isn't that nice that God knows that we're trustworthy even if we don't? We might have a false premise, and it might keep us in a dream. But we can wake up from the dream as we begin to see ourselves the way God sees us. I said before that you are the will of God. His will is not an idle wish, and your identification with His will is not optional, since it is what you are. Sharing His will with me is not really open to choice, though it may seem to be. The whole separation lies in this error. The only way out of the error is to decide that you do not have to decide anything. Wow, the way out of the error is to decide that you don't have to decide anything. We'll be shown what to do and what to think, where to go, what to do. Everything has been given you by God's decision. That is His will, and you cannot undo it. 7. Even the relinquishment of your false decision-making prerogative, which the ego guards so jealously, is not accomplished by your wish. It was accomplished for you by the will of God, who has not left you comfortless. His voice will teach you how to distinguish between pain and joy, and will lead you out of confusion, the confusion you have made. God's voice will teach you how to distinguish between pain and joy, and will lead you out of the confusion you have made. There is no confusion in the mind of a son of God, whose will must be the will of the Father, because the Father's will is His Son. And the last paragraph, 8, miracles are in accord with the will of God, whose will you do not know because you are confused about what you will. This means that you are confused about what you are. If you are God's will and do not accept His will, you are denying joy. The miracle is therefore a lesson in what joy is. Being a lesson in sharing, it is a lesson in love, which is joy. Every miracle is thus a lesson in truth, and by offering truth, you are learning the difference between pain and joy. Every miracle is thus a lesson in truth, and by offering truth, you're learning the difference between pain and joy. Let's read that last paragraph one more time. Miracles are in accord with the will of God, whose will you do not know because you're confused about what you will. This means that you are confused about what you are. If you are God's will and do not accept His will, you're denying joy. The miracle is therefore a lesson in what joy is. Being a lesson in sharing, it is a lesson in love, which is joy. Every miracle is thus a lesson in truth, and by offering truth, you're learning the difference between pain and joy. Okay, now we're going to go back and look at our lesson 60, but before we actually read it, what's going on around the world? Like I said, it's leap year, and you know the way they find leap year? It's any year divisible by 4, except on the century years, and those it has to be divisible by 400. Okay, so 1900 wouldn't have been a leap year, where 2000 was, and then 2004, and 2024 divisible by 4. Bachelor's Day, that's an Irish. It's the ladies. It's kind of like Sadie Hawkins, I guess. It's when the Irish ladies can pick a bachelor and propose to him. Doesn't mean he has to accept, of course. Digital Learning Day, International Underlings Day, basically Workers' Day, instead of Management Day. Leap Year Day, National Chili Day, National Toast Day, Rare Disease Day, Superman's Birthday, Surf and Turf Day, Yellowstone Park Day. And Yellowstone was the first national park ever established in the world, is what I'm understanding. And it was started I think it was on well, it says March 1st, but I expect it was probably February the 29th. It was a leap year, 1872, by Ulysses S. Grant. And 96% of the park is in Wyoming. There's 3% in Montana and 1% in Idaho. Fort Laramie strawberry out of Gurney's. We're trying to kind of, it's strawberry planting time if you're in the Ozarks, and I thought we'd just take a little time to look at some of these strawberries. The Fort Laramie, it's a Fragaria ananosa, and the hardiest ever bearer you can grow, the Fort Laramie. It goes zones 3 through 7. Super sturdy strain, thrives in all parts of the country, withstands the worst winters without mulch, produces a fair amount of runners and huge crops of bright red berries bursting with juice. Honey sweet flavor is excellent fresh for processing. Self-pollinating, like I said, zones 3 through 7, and it is an ever-bearing variety. I imagine it doesn't produce a whole, I don't know that it's a day neutral one. So it probably only produces, fall and I don't know that for sure though. Spring and fall. Do your own checking on that if you're wanting to plant those. Okay, and then Permaculture for Beginners by Carrie Mitchell. We're still in Chapter 3, Designing Your Permaculture Garden, and this next section is microclimates, where where you try to affect the temperature, the humidity, the moisture content, all based on positioning around different structures or trees, or and plants can create microclimates. So that's what she really emphasizes. And then she also talks about how that when you grow groups of plants, instead of just planting one plant, grow a group of plants, and they tend to help each other create that conditions where they thrive. So microclimates. Okay. Now let's go take a look at our lesson for today. Lesson 60. God is the love in which I forgive. God is the love in which I forgive. God does not forgive because He has never condemned. Isn't that a nice thought? A lot of us didn't realize that. We thought God was an angry God, one of those false premises that we needed to get forgiven by. But God doesn't forgive because He never did condemn us. We're His dearly beloved Son, and in His world, in the reality world, we are innocent no matter what we've done in this dream called the world. But we can bring heaven to earth, and that should be our prayer. Thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. God does not forgive because He has never condemned. The blameless cannot blame, and those who have accepted their innocence see nothing to forgive. Yet forgiveness is the means by which I will recognize my innocence. It is the reflection of God's love on earth. It will bring me near enough to heaven that the love of God can reach down to me and raise me up to Him. So we want to live in a world that is forgiven by us, and where we see that everyone who comes to us has forgiven us. We get to make that decision, and we can see them the way that God created them. No matter what they think they're doing to us, no matter what, even if they're nailing you to a cross, you can still see them that they've forgiven you. That's their reality. And that's not just an ostrich putting your head in the sand mentality. It's a decision to rule out illusions because they are illusions. No matter how many people agree that that's really happening to you and that you're being persecuted, no, you don't have to see it. You can see what's really going on, which you'll be able to see as we become more in alignment with the way God sees. God is the strength in which I trust. Our next review, which is review 47. It is not my own strength through which I forgive. It is through the strength of God in me which I am remembering as I forgive. As I begin to see, I recognize His reflection on earth. I forgive all things because I feel the stirring of His strength in me. And I begin to remember the love I chose to forget, but which has not forgotten me. The love we chose to forget, but that love has not forgotten me. I've heard it called the hound of heaven. A hound being on the tail of a coon. Well, love's on your tail looking for you, and He'll find you. All you got to do is just let go and let God. There is nothing to fear. 48. How safe the world will look to me when I can see it. It will not look anything like what I imagine I see now. Everyone and everything I see will lean toward me to bless me. I will recognize in everyone my dearest friend. What could there be to fear in a world that I have forgiven and that has forgiven me? Remember, that world has forgiven you because you've forgiven all the condemnations that are coming towards you. You don't have to wait for someone to see the light before you realize that they've forgiven you. You can reach beyond what seems to be going on in the present moment in this world and realize that there is a state of grace where they are in eternally. And that's how you want to see your brothers and sisters. God's voice, and everyone's your brother and sister. God's voice speaks to me all through the day. Our fourth review, which is lesson 49. God's voice speaks to me all through the day. In this first sentence, what a wonderful statement. There is not a moment in which God's voice ceases to call on my forgiveness to save me. There is not a moment in which God's voice ceases to call on my forgiveness to save me. There is not a moment in which His voice fails to direct my thoughts, guide my actions, and lead my feet. I'm walking steadily on toward truth. There is nowhere else I can go because God's voice is the only voice and the only guide that has been given to His Son. I am sustained by the love of God. And this is our last lesson 50 review, our fifth review for today. I am sustained by the love of God. As I listen to God's voice, I'm sustained by His love. As I open my eyes, His love lights up the world for me to see. As I forgive, His love reminds me that His Son is sinless. All those people that you thought were guilty, you can now see them as sinless through the eyes of Christ, the forgiven world. As I forgive, God's love reminds me that His Son is sinless. And as I look upon the world with the vision He has given me, I remember that I am His Son. Isn't that beautiful? Okay, well, let's close. You can do one of your 2 minutes. You're supposed to be doing at least 7 2-minute practices today, morning and evening, and this will be our last review to do it. Do the band. You know, you can do way more than that. Let's see. Let's make sure I get this right. God is the love in which I forgive. God is the love in which I forgive. God is the strength in which I trust. God is the strength in which I trust. There is nothing, nothing to fear. There is nothing, nothing to fear. God's voice speaks to me all through the day. God's voice speaks to me all through the day. I am sustained by the love of God. I am sustained by the love of God. God is the love in which I forgive. God is the strength in which I trust. There is nothing, nothing to fear. There is nothing, nothing to fear. God's voice speaks to me all through the day. God's voice speaks to me all through the day. I am sustained by the love of God. I am sustained by the love of God. God is the love in which I forgive. God is the strength in which I trust. There is nothing, nothing to fear. God's voice speaks to me all through the day. I am sustained by the love of God. I am sustained by the love of God. God is the love in which I forgive. God is the strength in which I trust. There is nothing to fear. There is nothing to fear. God's voice speaks to me all through the day. God's voice speaks to me all through the day. I am sustained by the love of God. I am sustained by the love of God. And our word for peace is out of the Bambara people language of Mali. And there's two words that they use. One is here, H-E-R-E, and the other is Iribi. And since I'm not sure which, how they pronounce both of them for sure, but let's just go with here for today. So the word for in the Bambara people's language of Mali, here. God is the love in which I forgive. Forgiveness is the reflection of God's love in this world of illusions, this world of judgment and condemnation. See the innocence in your brother. God is the love in which I forgive. God is the strength in which I trust. There is nothing to fear. God's voice speaks to me all through the day. I am sustained by the love of God. Here.